It's Diana. I am going to prepare food, but this one I need to talk about it first. So when we talked about story, I mentioned that I was going to come back to Yarrow and that there is almost no food in this book. So what I did at one point, I'm like, let me go back. He's got to eat. Somebody who's going on a quest. I mean, really think about Odysseus or the Odyssey. I had a professor who called it that great eating poem because there's a lot of eating. And if you're traveling, there are times of starving and eating. I mean, think of what other travel books are there. The Lord of the Rings. They talk about food at some points. In fact, they dwell on it. This one does not. So I just marked some of the parts that might have had food, but didn't, or it was just so small. So this is at toward the beginning of the book. Sending away all but the boy's father. This is the beginning with Ged and Aunt. The stranger stooped above the cot where Dunny lay. Dunny was what Sparrowhawk was called as a kid. Staring into the dark and did no more than, is that what I wanted? Oh, no more than lay his hand on the boy's forehead and touched his lips once. Dunny sat up slowly, looked about him. In a while he spoke, and strength and hunger began to come back into him. They gave him a little to drink and eat. That's it. That's all. That's the mention. Okay, so that's how it goes. Let's see. Now this is at Roke in the school. A gong had been rung while they were upstairs, and they, which is Jasper and Ged, or Sparrowhawk, and they came down to eat the noon meal at a long table of the refectory, along with 100 or more boys and young men. Each waited on himself. Sounds like Harry Potter, doesn't it? Waited on himself, joking with the cooks through the window hatches of the kitchen that opened into the refectory, loading his plate with from great bowls of food that steamed on the sills, sitting where he pleased at the long table. That's it. Bowls of food, steaming. So, no description. It's there. Yes, they have to feed their bodies, but not really a description. I'm not going to read them all. Oh, here's one. He saved a bit of meat for his dinner. The old lord, this is with Sarat, and she's married to him. The old lord kept mostly to his own apartments, coming forth mornings to pace up and down the snowy inner courtyard of the castle keep like an old sorcerer who had been brewing spells all night. When he joined Ged and Sarat for supper, he sat silent. The end. No description of food. Okay, so I'm going to stop because they're all like that. The most dwelling we get with food is before Ged and Vetch leave on that final leg of their journey. Yarrow, Vetch's sister, is fixing them these oat cakes. She calls them that because that's not what I'm making. That's what I was thinking I was going to do. These oat cakes. I think of like a more coarse pancake. Oh, a batch of cakes baking. She calls them cakes baking on the hearth bricks. So that's why I think they're like a pancake because they're maybe not. Maybe they're like scones or biscuits. But anyway, that's not the one. This is what meat pie. Meat pie is what I said. So she says she's very interested. Apparently, Vetch and Yarrow are not very different than in a way with siblings, that it's easier for Yarrow to ask Ged questions because he's not her brother. So she says, okay, here she goes. Yarrow says, I don't understand. You and my brother both are mighty wizards. You wave your hand and mutter and a thing is done. Why do you get hungry then? Which is interesting because we don't dwell on the hunger. But good question. Good question, Yarrow. When it comes supper time at sea, why not say, meat pie? And the meat pie appears and you eat it. I love that she asks this very kind of like mundane question. Why can't you take care of basic needs? And Ged says, well, We could do so, but we don't much wish to eat our words, as they say. Meat pie is only a word after all. We can make it odorous and savorous, so we can make it smell good and taste good and even filling. But it remains a word. It fools the stomach and gives no strength to the hungry man. Wizards, then, are not cooks, says Muir, who I didn't name, but that's Vetch's brother. And they go on to talk about that. So this idea of meat pie, and meat pie is what I'm going to make, and what I'm super. I gotta get something. Wait, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So one of the exciting things about meat pie, not just that's the food they talked about the longest, that and the cakes, but I don't. Anyway, the meat pie was more exciting to me. I've been wanting to make a meat pie for quite a while. I've never made a meat pie. I'm trying to think if I've ever eaten a meat pie. It's just not something I would. Okay, they're different, like things like a calzone or that's kind of, but not a whole. Like I'm thinking of a British meat pie. Never have I eaten that and or made it, and I've been wanting to. So I'm going to use 2 cookbooks. I'm going to use Paul Hollywood, How to Bake, and this is very pitiful. I'm going to use Talk About Good, and the reason it's pitiful is because my cover has fallen apart. I even have my mother's copy, and her cover has fallen apart too. So I'm going to use both of those to make oyster meat pies. Now, I could have sworn that there was a recipe in Talk About Good, and maybe I still haven't found it, for oyster dressing. I had an uncle who used to make oyster dressing. It was yummy, my Uncle Frank. And my mom a couple of times made oyster dressing. Now, I was young. I don't think I ever made it. And I can't ask either of them where the recipe is because my Uncle Frank has died and my mother has dementia. So I can't ask either of them. I've looked through this book. I've found some oyster pie, but it's not dressing, which I wanted to make dressing. I can't find oyster dressing in here at all. It's the second time I look for a recipe I swear's in this book and I can't find it. But I was a kid, so who knows what my memory did. But I'm going to put them together. I'm going to use, because the oyster pie in Talk About Good is kind of like a chicken pot pie, which I have eaten that. I don't know if that counts as a meat pie. But it's like a base with a puff pastry top. But I want to make a pork pie, but I don't eat pork, so I'm going to do oysters, and I'm going to use Paul Hollywood's book to use his I can't think of what it's called, hot water crust recipe, and I'm going to put the oysters into it. That's going to be adventure meat pie.